Welcome to Weight Loss and Wellness for Real, the podcast where people like you get the practical solutions and support you need to permanently lose the physical and mental weight so you can feel better and live the life you really want to live in the body and mind you really want to be living in. If you're looking to overcome your stress eating, overeating, binging behaviors, and move to a place of food and body freedom, as well as find more meaning and more moments of joy in life, you are in the right place. Hello, everyone. Thank you for listening and being here. Just a reminder that you can head to my website at heatherheynen.com. It's Heynen, so heatherheynen.com. And there you can sign up for my free monthly newsletter. I always write about something in regards to strategies or techniques to incorporate into your daily life to create more well-being or wellness. And then I also always include a high-protein recipe and as well as links to products that support the podcast. There are links with discount codes. So it's free. I never, ever give out or sell your email address. So head to my website and sign up for that. Also, from wherever you're listening to this, is if you'd be so kind as to subscribe from whatever platform you're listening to. If you hit that subscribe button, that really, really, really helps me keep this podcast and episode coming out every single week. It really helps to support this podcast. It really changes the algorithm so that other people can find it more easily. So the more subscribers, the more I can continue to keep doing this. So if you're finding value out of this podcast, that would be a really amazing way to show your support, is just to subscribe or follow the show from whatever platform you are listening to. Okay, so let's move on. We are going to talk about boundaries today. I have been thinking about doing an episode on this for quite a while. And then I kind of got a bunch of different guests who wanted to be on the show, and so was doing more interviews for a while. And finally just got around to really thinking through a topic that I've been wanting to do. And so it is boundaries. And that word is really getting thrown around a lot, so much today. I see it all the time popping up on social media, and especially the little, pop psychology influencers talking about setting boundaries, and how you need boundaries for your health, all which is very true. So this was part of the reason I wanted to do a full episode on boundaries, to kind of give my clinical take and experience on setting and using boundaries to really create freedom for ourselves, to increase our emotional and mental wellness, because boundaries do that, my friends. And for those of you listening who are working on losing weight and or keeping weight off or wanting to optimize your health, I am going to talk specifically about learning to set appropriate boundaries with yourself as one of the keys for sustainable weight loss. And I'm going to talk about that towards the end of the episode. So make sure that you listen to the end. So first of all, let's get really, really clear about what boundaries are. And I often hear people saying, well, I set this boundary, but really what it is, it's a request. So I want you to really understand boundaries are not requests, right? So an example might be something I hear is, well, I set a boundary that I wanted her to stop calling me every day. Okay, this is a request, people. This is not a boundary. When we set boundaries, we are making clear what we will or will not tolerate. So requests ask someone to change their behavior, which they may or may not do. You have zero control over someone else's behavior. By the way, you can make all kinds of requests. You should be making requests. But when we make a request, that does not mean the other person is going to do what we ask them to do, and we have no control. We also cannot enforce it. So the outcome really is out of our control. Sorry, I'm still sipping on coffee this morning. Okay, so I want you to listen really closely to the nuance here. Stop calling me every day. That's a request. Versus, I will no longer answer the phone when you call every single day. This is a boundary. Stop yelling at me. That's a request. I will not continue this conversation when you raise your voice at me. That is a boundary. So a boundary is only meaningful if we enforce it. So if you stick around as the person is yelling at you, the boundary is not actually a boundary. Okay. So the boundary has to be what you are willing to do or not do. And then you do have to follow through on it for it to be a clear boundary. So when we set a boundary, we are making clear what our actions will be. Boundaries are not requests. Boundaries are enforceable. And in order for them to be enforceable, that means they're on us and that the outcome is within our control. It's really coming from a place of empowerment versus, what do we want to say, neediness. So when we are empowered, it means that we are taking action. You know, what we say is enforceable. So it has to be on us. Think of boundaries as the guidelines we set for how we will engage with others. They are not demands or ultimatums, but rather they're these declarations of self-care and personal integrity. And that's where that empowerment piece comes from. I often think about when we set boundaries, it's not like we hold expectations on how others will treat us, but instead we hold strong to our clear standards on how we're going to be treated by others. So I don't expect you to do what I want you to do. In fact, yeah, I have zero expectations for anyone. And I actually teach my clients this too, because it just creates so much freedom in your life. It's a beautiful thing. If you drop all your expectations for everyone, like what they're going to do, life becomes so amazing. But here's the catch. You still have standards for how you will be treated or maybe how things will be done within the household if we're talking about kids. But you let go of the expectations that people are going to perform in ways that you somehow tell a story to yourself that you need them to perform or want them to perform. You just drop all that. You let go of expectations, but you still hold standards for how you will be treated. And that changes everything because you still have standards for how you'll be treated, but you drop the struggle of having these expectations for people who you have zero control over and just kind of waiting for them to fulfill an expectation that there's this whole struggle and tension piece that goes into that. So think about dropping your expectations for others and instead think about the word standards, holding standards. What are your standards? It kind of goes along with this idea of what are your boundaries, right? So the idea would be, I don't expect you to do what I want you to do, but I hold a standard for how I will be treated by you. And if you don't treat me that way and you mistreat me, then this is my boundary and this is what I'm going to do. Basically, I'm out. So let's explore the concept a little further through some real life examples. So think about a situation where a friend is constantly canceling plans at the last minute. So setting a boundary here might involve expressing directly, by the way, that if plans are canceled without sufficient notice, you're going to make different arrangements. Or consider a situation where a coworker frequently interrupts you during meetings. So setting a boundary could mean calmly stating that if interruptions continue, you are going to address them directly or involve a supervisor, right? That's a boundary. So it's really important to understand boundaries aren't fixed. They don't need to be rigid. Boundaries do not mean forever and always. Boundaries can be really adaptable and they can be responsive to the ebb and flow of life. What feels acceptable one day might not the next to you. A lot of times this has to do with energy levels that we're having, and that's perfectly okay. So one day that coworker interrupting you all the time, you can kind of deal with it. It's not that big of a deal, but you didn't get good sleep or, you know, the kids kept you up late at night, whatever it is. And so that next day you're low on energy and those interruptions are driving you nuts. So that day might be the day you have a boundary. Hey, if you keep interrupting me today, I'm going to have some words with you, or I'm going to talk to the supervisor, whatever it is. So just understanding that boundaries do not need to be fixed and they don't need to be rigid. Flexibility in boundaries really allow us to honor our needs and values kind of while we're navigating through the day-to-day complexities of our human interaction with grace and with authenticity. You can flex your boundaries, right? So again, one day I have energy to deal more with difficulties and difficult people. Other days I might not have as much energy, and so my boundaries are a bit different. All right. So why are boundaries so vital for our mental, emotional, and physical well-being? Why is everybody talking about them? Why are there books and self-help workshops and all the things on learning to have healthy boundaries? I want you to think about a world without boundaries, or maybe you're not great at setting boundaries. So think about your life, a place where our personal space and autonomy are constantly compromised. Boundaries really serve as protective barriers for ourselves, really shielding us from harm, preserving our sense of self, preserving our energy. The biggest idea here and why we need to establish healthy boundaries is that boundaries really, and for me, this is everything, cultivate self-respect and agency. And if maybe I should do a podcast on just the word and idea of agency, because there's a whole bunch of research done on if you feel in agency of your life. That word agency, it creates, if you feel you have agency, it is linked to so many emotional and uh, mental health positives. So having agency in life is one of the number one things that brings us sort of moments of joy and meaning and purpose, is having that agency. And without boundaries, we have zero agency. So having healthy boundaries really cultivate that sense of agency, that sense of self-respect. This gets into confidence. Gets into a core belief of self-worthiness, which if you've listened to this podcast long enough, you know that sense of worthiness at our core is everything. Everything kind of emanates from that. So boundaries, having healthy boundaries for yourself is really, really important. This is where we're really communicating to the world that our needs and feelings matter. So we are communicating to the world through our boundaries that our needs and feelings matter, but really, in a way, we are communicating that to ourselves. So this also gets into building a healthy relationship with ourselves, which we really need to live in authenticity, to live in freedom. So setting these healthy boundaries is another way that we sort of tell a part of ourselves, hey, we're worth it, we're important, we're worthy. So it's a we communicate to the world and ourselves that we deserve to be treated with dignity and respect, and this self-awareness really forms that foundation of authentic, fulfilling relationships that are built on mutual respect and reciprocity. And again, this builds that healthy relationship with ourselves. When we have a healthy relationship with ourselves, again, I'm repeating myself here, but it's so important. We have feelings of self-worth. We feel good. We feel confident. We feel empowered. We feel free in life. And this all leads to that very fulfilled life with no need to numb, with no need to distract or use substance to change negative emotions. And this is how we can relate setting healthy boundaries to extend beyond our interactions with others. They also shape our relationship with ourselves as well as our relationship with food. So food boundaries encompass our ability to honor our body's cues and really nourish ourselves in a way that respects our physical and emotional well-being. And this involves listening to our body's signals of hunger and fullness and making food choices that really align with our individual preferences and needs on a day-to-day basis. So how do we cultivate healthier boundaries around food to really achieve true food freedom? Because we're talking about when we set healthy boundaries within the world, within our relationships for ourselves, that really does give us this ability to live in authenticity and to live in freedom. And so you can see how this kind of patterns over to where we create healthier boundaries around food. We can also achieve food freedom. And this starts with tuning into our body's wisdom and treating ourselves with compassion and understanding. So instead of rigid rules or restrictions, we're really embracing conscious eating, right? This very mindful approach to eating that honors our body's innate wisdom and preferences. Now, this is a skill that we build in regards to food, this really honoring our body signals. A lot of us, I know for me, being a binge eater for years and years, and a huge restrictor for years and years, I really lost the ability to sense in my body my hunger and fullness cues. So it's not like, oh, I set healthy boundaries around food and all of a sudden I'm in this very, conscious eating approach and it's so easy. No, this is a skill that we build. It's just that when we set conscious boundaries around food, it starts to help us tune in to the wisdom of our body and really slowing down and getting mindful um, with food and with what we're putting into our bodies. Setting boundaries with food also means recognizing the fluidity of our needs and desires. So again, remember how I talked about on some days when you have more energy, your boundaries might be different than on days when you have less energy. So same thing with food boundaries. Some days you might crave nourishing, wholesome foods, while in others you might indulge in more indulgent treats. But by honoring these fluctuations and listening to your body's cues, you can really cultivate a balanced and sustainable relationship with food that nourishes both your body and your soul. So remember that setting boundaries with food, it's not about deprivation. And a lot of times I've used the word guidelines in the past with food, but really we could use the word boundaries interchangeably. Um, Setting boundaries and guidelines really is a form of creating self-respect for yourself and nourishing the body. This is how you use a mindset shift around this to really help. So having boundaries and guidelines is not restriction, like so many of us kind of tend to put those words together. You got to work to unwind those words from each other. Boundaries and guidelines with food is actually about us taking care of ourselves, just like setting other kinds of boundaries in our lives is about creating that healthier relationship with ourselves. It's about taking care of us. So setting boundaries with food and guidelines is not about deprivation or punishment. It is about reclaiming agency over your eating choices and honoring your body's unique needs and preferences. Okay, so as we navigate the intricacies of boundaries and relationships and food, I really want you to think about this as, it's this journey that we're kind of all on of self-discovery and growth. And it's really about honoring our needs and respecting our limits and also cultivating greater compassion and understanding, both for ourselves and others. So, practical ideas this week: give this idea of a mindset shift around boundaries a chance. So, if we're thinking about boundaries with food, maybe write out three, 1 to 3 boundaries or guidelines that would be helpful for you in feeling better and having more energy. If you have a weight loss goal and maybe dropping a pound this week, what would be those guidelines or boundaries that you might set in place and write them out? So, an idea might be if you're drinking a glass of wine every night, or 2, maybe the guideline's going to be, I'm going to have 1 glass of wine every night, or I'm going to have a half a glass of wine every night, or I'm going to practice having a glass of wine just on Friday and Saturday night this week. It's something like that. Another guideline or boundary you might have set for yourself this week, remember, by the way, these need to be doable, might be, I'm used to having the full sleeve of cookies while I sit and watch Netflix. I'm going to try to have 2 less cookies, right? I mean, just really setting these boundaries or guidelines for yourself. And what happens when you follow through on those, you start to build, when I always talk about momentum, you start to build that momentum to kind of keep things going. You really start to feel better about yourself because you're building this sense of agency, this sense of confidence, this sense of I am worth this. And when you really get into that, um, it really becomes much easier to be able to sustain behaviors that maybe you've been wanting to sustain, but keep kind of falling back into old patterns. So this is a little bit of that deeper work, right? When we're hitting that deeper sense of ourselves and this deeper work of building a sense of worthiness in order to follow through on behaviors that we want to follow through on. All right, I'm going to wrap it up there. Thank you so much for being here and for listening as we kind of took a look at boundaries. I also recommend that, I didn't even say this, but you try out setting some healthy boundaries within relationships for yourself as well. Maybe one or two at work that would be helpful for you. Maybe it is like if you're getting interrupted all the time, you let everyone know, hey, I'm kind of changing things up. You can interrupt me between this hour and this hour, but the rest of the hours, my office door stays closed this week because I'm working on this project. Just anything that it might be, but setting boundaries within relationships. Remember, healthy boundary setting is a practice or a skill, and so you really do need to practice it. So get intentional this week. Write out some ways that you're going to practice setting healthy boundaries for yourself. I know that many of us get super uncomfortable doing this. That's why we need to do it. We need to do the uncomfortable thing. It's what opens up our whole world, allows us to be authentic. And I'm telling you, there is so much freedom when you start living in this way. Okay, that really is it for today. If you have any questions on how I work with people, you can head over to my website, heatherheynen.com. At this moment, I'm full, but I do always have a running waiting list. So if that's something you're thinking that you'd like to work one-on-one, send me an email from my website and we can talk about that a little bit. But this is also why I created the online courses that I have going right now and more to come. But because I am full and can't take everybody on right now. So those online courses are meant to kind of help someone get started and get going if you are struggling with emotional eating or overeating. There is one of my courses that would be really helpful for you to get started. So I would point you there. You can check those all out from my website as well, heatherheynen.com. All right, we will talk soon. Hi, everyone. Guess what? I have a lovely discount code just for you, my listeners. The code is 10 off. That's 10OFF, and it will get you 10% off any one of my online courses, which now include Mastering Mindful Eating, Overcome Binge Eating, Overeating, and Emotional Eating for Good. And I also have a course on When You Want to Stop the Weight Loss Medication, a comprehensive guide to weight maintenance and mastery. So if you've maybe lost some weight using a medication and you're now wanting to go off the medication but keep the weight off, this is the course for you. And any course you buy, you keep the course for a minimum of 3 years, maybe longer. It just depends on how many are purchased. All courses are self-paced, and I promise you they are practical, meaning they don't just tell you what you need to do. You actually engage in the skills and strategies needed to make actual lasting behavior change. You learn how to do the what. Okay, all courses have multiple modules with multiple lessons. All include lots of examples, tips, and tricks to make things simple and clear. And you also get lots of downloadable resources, including the daily planning template that I use with my own clients, the exact protocol to use after a binge or an overeat has occurred to minimize its damage on your body and your mind. There are protein cheat sheets, research-based journaling prompts, and the literal how-to checklists on the skill you are learning about. And with the weight maintenance course, you also have a movement module that will help you figure out how to make a movement plan that fits your particular lifestyle and level of fitness. And you also have a natural appetite regulation module. So whether if you have never tried an online course to change behavior, or if you have, I just highly would recommend that you try one of these. I've put my heart and soul into both of them. They are all research-based, and now you can get 10% off. So again, that code is 10OFF. If you're ready to make changes that last, you can go to my website, heatherheynen.com. Heynen is spelled Heynen. And from the main menu, click courses, and it will get you to where you want to go. Or you can click on the links in the episode description below the show. And again, as soon as you're there, when you're ready for checkout, just enter the code 10OFF, 10 off. And just a reminder, I also have an ebook cookbook that is now available. It's called Protein Forward Easy Recipes. It includes all high protein recipes, including breakfasts and sweet treats full of protein and lunches and dinner. Okay, so again, head to my website. It's probably the easiest thing to do, heatherheynen.com. Heynen is spelled Heynen. And from there, go to courses or the cookbook. And again, use code 10 off at checkout. Did you know you can find a lot more help from me on my website? Go to heatherheynen.com. Heynen is spelled Heynen, and there you will find links to my online courses, how I work with clients one-on-one, as well as online with my coaching and counseling services that I offer. The information in this podcast is intended to provide a broad understanding and knowledge of healthcare topics. This information is for educational purposes only and should not be considered complete and should not be used in place of advice from your physician or healthcare provider. We recommend you consult your physician or healthcare professional before beginning or altering your personal exercise, diet, or supplementation program.